for. Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a good evening tonight. I am. Steve says, hi, Doc. How's the apocalypse going? Steve, how's the apocalypse going? I can say the same to you. I will say the same, by the way. I hope everybody is well tonight. There are a lot of things to cover, and I have to spend a lot of time on Social Security. So after I say hello, I'm going to get right to it. Hi, Kay. Kay says hi to Evelyn and Steve. Steve says hi, Kay. Steve is sharing. Kay, CNN is having a special report on the Electoral College tonight, but maybe we need that on this group as well. And Kathy Langtot. Sorry, Kathy, I'm not sure how you pronounce your name exactly. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for coming. And as long as I'm at it, I will call your attention to my Patreon account, which is in the graphic you see up on the page. It's patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And let me now show my face. Stop the screen sharing for a second. And now go on to share something else. I'll be sharing things tonight in pretty quick succession with a couple of exceptions. But let's see how we do with this. This is Worldometers. Just wanted to show you for a minute where we stand today. So we're still in the same rank position as we were, but we lost another 1,071 people overnight, according to Worldometers, and we're at 172,606. Anthony Fauci was on this evening. He was on somebody's a YouTube program, and he quoted it as 165,000. I think he's a little behind. The deaths per million in the United States have now risen to 521. You'll notice how quickly this has climbed from the 480 of maybe a week and a half ago or something like that. It's really shooting up. There's now 22 deaths per million between us and Chile. And of course, after that, it's a short distance to Sweden. Chile's going up also pretty fast. They may stay ahead of us. And Brazil is climbing pretty fast too, so they may catch us. It remains to be seen. Anyway, obviously, these are terrible performance on the countries. The UK, which has been very bad for a long time, had only 3 new deaths yesterday compared to ourselves. We are 5 times the size, of course, in population, but if we were doing what the UK was doing today, we would have had only 15 deaths overnight instead of 1,071. So yeah, we're doing badly. Let's leave that. Let's stop sharing it. Let's leave it. And let's move very quickly to the next one. Then, next thing I want you to see. There are a lot of things I just want you to take note of tonight that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but that I'm just going through fast. Next thing I wanted to note was really an announcement. Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar, one of his favorite people, will be hosting a United Against Trump, quote unquote, town hall at the DNC convention. And there's the announcement. I've left the link for you, I believe. I hope so. I meant to leave the link for you. I hope I left the link for you. In the description, in the Facebook description. Tell me if it's there. I can't rightly remember whether I left all the links or not, but I can edit the description anytime I want. So I'll make sure after we finish that everything is there. But anyway, this is going to be at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th. Okay, 4 p.m. PT, 7 p.m. ET. And the event will feature Sanders-Omar and a panel of progressive organizers, as well as Heather Booth, Joe Biden's campaign director for progressive and senior outreach. So the progressives are combined with the seniors here. I guess they're the low priority people from the standpoint of who the Democrats want to get. But anyway, that should be very interesting. And so I commend it to you. I inform you about it, and I commend it to you. So next, where are we? What did I do? Next, we are moving through a lot of links now pretty fast. There is Ed Markey's ad. There was an article on it that appeared in Common Dreams. It's a wonderful ad. And the article by Julie Connolly says that it's exact right. The message is exact right message, unquote. And it's Ed Markey's must-watch 2020 campaign ad, praise for highlighting the broken social contract. But it's just such a beautifully constructed video. It's a 3-minute video, and it just covers Markey's career from the time he started off. And incidentally, for you ladies, when he was young, he was an astonishingly good-looking guy. Anyway, he's had a very long career in the House, of course. He was in the House for 37 years before he became a senator. So he's been around for an awfully long time. He's 74 now, I believe. And he's been a progressive all the time. All the time. He was part of the Kennedy clique, of course. And he's still part of the Kennedy clique, but not of the Joseph Kennedy clique. I think Joe Kennedy is not part of the Kennedy clique. I don't think he's a real Kennedy. I think he's an ersatz Kennedy. He's someone who never created himself a real Kennedy. And this ad will show you why Ed Markey is a progressive, and I think we can trust him. And it's really, really, really good marketing on our side. And so, the link is there, and I commend you to watch the video. If you haven't seen the video, that video is great. It's a great video. Oh, and by the way, Ed Markey now has a big lead over Joe Kennedy, I'm happy to say, in that race. I hope he sustains that extremely big lead. So here we are again. I'll share the screen again. I'm going through a series of quick links for you to note before I start on the Social Security thing. Here's a Dave Dayen column, which appeared a couple of days ago. What he's doing is he's calling for the Federal Reserve to save the state, and local governments here. And he points to The loan facility the Federal Reserve has, well, first, of course, he points to the problems the states are having. They've cut now more than 1 million jobs. With no deal, we can expect cuts that could cancel as many as 4 million jobs and slash 3% out of our GDP. Dave says it's the kind of mindless austerity that held the recovery back after the Great Recession, layered on top of a continuing public health emergency. Quote, due to Congress inaction, the ability of state and local governments, to deliver critical services to the American people is now in serious jeopardy. Read a statement from 7 organizations that represent states, cities, counties, and other local governments. There's a municipal liquidity facility that the Federal Reserve has. It was authorized in the CARES Act. There's plenty of money in it, but to date, it's been used exactly one time by the state of Illinois for $1.2 million in relief. Why is that a problem? Because the program costs too much. The interest rates are too high. They're different than the interest rates that were offered to corporations. There are 255 cities eligible for the program, but 97% would be functionally excluded because the penalty interest rates make it cheaper for them to borrow on the municipal bond markets. The Fed assisted with that earlier this week, lowering interest rates on short-term notes. But they do not do what several progressive House members requested, lower the rates so that they're equivalent to the federal funds rate, which right now is 0, extend the maturity to at least 5 years, and make smaller cities and counties eligible for the liquidity facility. The Fed has bought over 800 companies' corporate bonds because they had to keep their promises, according to Jay Powell. But the lending facility for municipalities is stuck on 1. Some regional Fed presidents have intimated that Treasury is holding up bigger changes on funding to which it contributed its CARES Act share. Others have said the states don't need the liquidity, they need grants, and the central bank's hands are tied. However, Badarian Shansky, a UC Davis professor of law and political science, figured out a way to untie those hands some months ago in a paper co-written with Indiana University's David Bagamaj. Shansky lays out how there's a way to avoid Treasury's effective veto on the program by lending under the Fed's Section 14 authority rather than the Section 13 authority being used now. Under those powers, the Fed can purchase 6-month notes that would be issued by the cities without needing an equity backstop from elsewhere. The way to extend the terms is to commit to repurchase the notes every 6 months for 20 years with a sliding schedule of repayment principal. Most localities have a short-term borrowing exception that could make this work. So that's a very good proposal, I think, one you ought to take note of. This sort of creates an operating deficit option in state and local governments for a period. In other words, like MMT, right? And of course, if you can roll over the notes for 20 years, you can commit to doing it for 100, or however long it takes to make those loans effectively grants. He says, I offered a version of this option back in June, and now it's become, if anything, more critical. Congress is stepping in and millions of jobs are at stake. It's time to unveil this option. So I'll stop that screen sharing of that one now. I want to call your attention to yet another one, though. which is pretty important. And that one is, I mentioned it actually last time. It's an article in Jacobin, Two Faces of Kamala Harris by Branko Marcetic. I'm not going to go through it here. I left you the link. If you care about Harris's record, this is the best article I've seen on her record. Okay, so it's an excellent piece, and I recommend it to you. I'm sharing it up there now. Is there any other thing I want to say about it? It starts by going through the good parts of her record before it gets to the decidedly unprogressive parts of her record, which are positively scandalous. So there we go. It's a fairly sizable article. If you want to have talking points to use on Facebook about her record, this is really a great piece to read. So I commend that to you. I'm going to stop sharing it now and go on to the next one. This one I want to spend a little more time on. Let me share it with you. It was something in Truth Out. It is really a beauty, I thought. Tugged at my heartstrings anyway. Whoops. Sorry, I shared the wrong one. So let me do it again. So there we go. We should now be seeing an article, As Politicians Play with Our Lives. It's hard to imagine a future beyond COVID. And it's by William Rivers Pitt. Okay, Truth Out starts off by quoting Prince. Honey, I know, times are changing. It's time we all reach out for something new. That means you too. This is from Purple Rain. And Pitt starts out, Centers for Disease Control, CDC Director Redfield gave an interview to WebMD this week. If people don't take COVID-19 precautions seriously, if they refuse to wear masks and practice social distancing, he flatly stated the nation could be on the verge of confronting, quote, the worst fall from a public health perspective we've ever had, unquote. Pitt says it must be Thursday. I haven't told my little girl she won't be going back to school at school this year. It's going to crush her. So I intend to wring whatever meager droplets of happy out of this wretched summer there are left before I give her the news. Quote, but daddy's school, unquote, in reality, isn't the hot ticket it sounded like to her in March. But there were 55,910 new COVID infections and 1,499 deaths reported just by yesterday. And this was written, by the way, on August the 13th. So yesterday was August the 12th. He said, must have been Wednesday. See, sweetie, there's a state called Georgia whose governor believes this ridiculous president hung the moon and stars. Trump wants all you kids back in school despite the astonishing danger because he fears being indicted next February if he loses the election in November. The Georgia governor got on board and shoved children into ill-prepared schools. Other governors did the same. And now, just days later, thousands of students across the South are infected with COVID. That's probably going to be the story for the whole country soon, sweetie, especially in states with governors who listen to Trump about reopening schools. I'm not going to let that happen to you. You're so proud of being a second grader now, and I'm so very proud of you for the way you've held your head up throughout this bleak passage, the way you've been my strength and your mother's strength. But you're going to have to be a second grader here at home until this nightmare finds its end. I'm so sorry. Please don't cry, my dearest. Oh, please don't cry. It must be every day now. I feel broken. There isn't a better word for the nigh overwhelming weight of sorrow, fear, fury, and utter futility swarming within. I look at the photographs from the bike rally at Sturgis and tremble in rage. I watch this president brazenly refusing to fund the U.S. Postal Service because he fears losing if people are able to vote safely in November, and I want to eat my teeth or his. Every day, every hour, there is a new outrage that would have stopped the world 4 years ago. Sometimes it leaves me gasping, quote, "It didn't have to be this way," unquote, is too huge a thought to hold in mind for very long. If I think on that simple sentence for any length of time, my hands start to shake and the veins start to show in my forehead. That wrath will have to wait, I tell myself in soothing tones. That wrath will have its day. I'm one of the damned lucky ones, too. Healthy as your average middle-aged horse so far. My friends have gotten infected here and there, but they have all recovered to one degree or another. I've been to no Zoom funerals yet, which in this moment makes me blessed. There's a hell of a shabby hook to hang your emotional hat on, though. It could be worse is almost always the truth. But these days, that worse is a yawning chasm. Down there is where you or someone's you love dies choking and alone in a room with machines beeping, the dwindling metronome of dissolution, entropy, barren infinity. Down there is one misplaced sneeze away in the grocery aisle maybe, or in line for prescriptions at the pharmacy or in the doctor's waiting room. The places you have to go are the places that can get you killed now. When I go food shopping, I think of blackjack. Every time I walk through the door, I am saying, "Hit me," to the COVID dealer. I've been standing pat at 16 for months, but on a long enough timeline, the dealer will turn a big card. To understand that, you have to have played some blackjack, I think. The future is a storm cloud that has devoured the horizon, all gray and bruised to purple. For the first time in my life, there often seems to be no future, not really. The sense that there is little to hope for or look forward to but the end of this thing, and not dying before that end comes can be staggering. The future is keeping my little girl and my family as safe as I can within reach of my arm. The future is today, and what I can do to hold it together, remembering that I am one of the lucky ones. This is luck now. When the future returns, and it will, I intend to turn my daughter loose like a hard-charging cult upon a hopefully wiser world. She will appreciate it more than I ever did because of this experience, and so will I. When the future returns, wrath will have its say and its day. Until then, it must be Thursday, because all I see is darkness. I thought you should have the benefit, such as it is, of my reading that. I thought it was a brilliant column, and I am very appreciative of it. So, let us move now then to the next item on my share list, which is the latest news. This I will not read, we'll just call your attention to. Article from The Intercept that was co-written by Owen Higgins, who normally writes for Common Dreams, and also Daniel Boguslaw and Ryan Grimm. They wrote this on March 14th, and the title is Party Leaders Investigating Origin of Anti-Morse Campaign Helped Orchestrate It, Documents Reveal. And the subheadline is, Massachusetts party leaders, that is Democratic Party leaders, coach college Democrats ahead of the release of a letter outlining allegations against Alex Morse. There's a picture, of Alex Morse, and this goes through the sordid details of how the college Democrats, who had been out to get Morse, really since he announced it was a year-old plan, and in implementing this plan to knock Alex Morse out of the race against Ways and Means Chair, Mr. Richie Neal. The implementation of this plan was coached by big shots from a Democrat state committee in Massachusetts. One of the big shots was James Roosevelt. I believe he's the third James Roosevelt, also known as Jim Roosevelt, the grandson of FDR. He's a major power broker within the state and the national Democratic parties. He contributed to Neal's campaigns in 2008 and 2016, giving $1,000 and $500. He is, what shall I say? He's not following in his grandfather's footsteps. He's not for the Green New Deal. He's not for Medicare for all. He's a party establishment figure. And he and another party establishment figure by the name of Jim Roosevelt and Veronica Martinez, who's the executive director of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. And the chair is a man by the name of Bickford, his name is Gus Bickford. And Gus was calling for an investigation, quote, to examine the conduct of college Democrats who leveled the allegations against Morse. And it turns out that the state party is not in complete agreement in opposition to Morse. And the facts are beginning to come out that Jim Roosevelt and was advising the College Democrats, and Martinez was too, and also Jim Roosevelt is a former CEO for health insurance giant Tufts Health Plan. By the way, he's going to co-chair the Credentials Committee next week at the DNC. No one from state party leadership ever reached out to Morse. So it looks like the fix was in here. It hasn't been tied to Neil yet, but the reporters are continuing to investigate. If it is tied to Neil, I have a feeling in the primary on September 1st, it's going to go hard with him. If Morse, who's backed by Justice Democrats and the Sunrise Movement, should win, then, of course, he'll no longer be the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. That's just about the most powerful committee in Congress. It touches every piece of legislation that passes the House. If Neil falls, and this is a quote from the article, the progressive representative Lloyd Doggett, who's Democrat of Texas, would be next in line for the committee gavel. Now, Lloyd Doggett is no member of the squad, but he is among the most other progressives in the party. He is a real progressive, has been over the years for some time. He has been on the left wing of the party. He's often referred to as the most intelligent congressman in the Congress. He was formerly a physicist. So in terms of sheer intelligence, he's supposed to be as good as Congress gets. Over the years, he's been a very effective congressman, and he's been about as lefty as you can get and not suffer the consequences. He would not be blocking legislation that would emerge out of the squad. In other words, a victory by Morse would be a very big victory for progressives, not just because of Morse himself winning, but because of Doggett's inheriting the Ways and Means Committee. And of course, also Morse undoubtedly joining the squad, because he seems to stand with the squad, on everything. So he would be another recruit for the squad. That would be fantastic. So it's imperative that we get a victory for Morse. It's imperative we do everything we can to get a victory for Morse. There's no evidence here that Morse did anything wrong except to date other people his own age and also gender. He never dated anyone who he was teaching. He never violated any university rules according to all the evidence so far. He played it clean. All he did was to have a social life, and to date. He's a real upright and straight up guy, and as well as commending this particular article to you, I commend I don't know if it was a live stream, or a video today. It was probably a live stream at the time. He was on the Useful Idiots program with Matt, and Katie. And he really did a terrific job on that program. Every interview I've seen with him so far, he's done a terrific job. But on this program, he got a really long interview from them. And he really came across as a stand-up, strong, idealistic guy, the kind we want fighting for us in Congress all day long and all year long. So, stop sharing that. Okay, the next thing to call your attention to is it's a piece on Bernie Sanders that appeared in Common Dreams. Sanders warns of Trump effort to destroy the post office to sabotage the election. Now, you've been seeing, I'm sure, a lot of stuff on this. This was written today, August 15, 2020, by Andrea Germanis, staff writer at Common Dreams, and a mailman wearing a mask and gloves, loading a postal truck, and quoting a lot of Bernie Sanders, saying we're not going to allow Trump to destroy the Postal Service and suppress the vote, and he's out there campaigning. One thing I thought was significant about this article was there was a tweet from John Tester. They evidently were removing mail collection boxes across Montana, and he made a call to the post office and said, you better stop that. And he says in a tweet, but it's not over. Evidently the post office did stop that in his state, but he said, but it's not over. Postmaster DeJoy still owes us answers on why they were removed in the first place. He says, John Tester says, Senator John Tester, I'm going to continue holding Postmaster DeJoy accountable till he reinstates the reportedly dozens of USPS mail collection boxes that were removed across Montana. I wish he had as much concern for what's going on in other states. That's important because a USPS spokesperson told CNN Friday night that the collection of boxes would be on hold in Washington, Oregon, also Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, and so on and so on. Bessina noted that it's unclear if the removal freeze would go into effect across the nation. So they were removing the boxes. Now that action is frozen, I guess, as a result, of pressure. There's an Onion article about this that's basically spoofing this. There was a photo taken in Wisconsin. But they were collecting the mailboxes, the drop boxes, so people wouldn't be able to mail their stuff. They were doing it out, in Oregon. Anyway, I wanted to share that article, and there's a link to it, and I commend it to you, certainly. So next, yes, we're bearing down on Social Security now. We will get there very shortly. First, I want to share the screen, share my screen, pull up another column by Dave Dayan from Unsanitized. Doing the math on the Postal Service hustle. This is from August 14th, 2020. There's no column today. And he goes through these letters that have been sent to states, strongly recommending the states pay nearly 3 times as much for first-class postage or risk having the ballots actually delivered late. Wisconsin received such a state letter. Pennsylvania received also such a state letter. Okay, the assumption that Dave makes is that this letter went out to every state because the state of Washington and the state of Pennsylvania got the same letter. The Pennsylvania letter is the subject of a lawsuit where activists and election officials are both asking for emergency changes to state law to extend the deadlines for ballots, explicitly to avoid disenfranchisement of voters during the pandemic. And Dave then questions the entire premise of these letters. He says the idea is that a ballot sent by states and counties as marketing mail, okay, a lower class designation, would not arrive on time to voters amid a surge in postal delivery around the election. Dave says, first of all, the entire point of the Postal Service crisis generally, to hear it from the privatizers, is that mail traffic has been slumping as people pay bills online and use electronic communication. Second, we're not talking about a lot of ballots in the grand scheme of things. As I mentioned on Tuesday, as of 2018, there were 153 million registered voters in the United States. Not every one of them is going to request a mail-in ballot. In fact, a diminishing number of Trump supporters will, though Trump himself did for the Florida primary. Let's go on the extreme high side and say that 80 million ballots have to be distributed. The U.S. Postal Service distributes 182 million pieces of mail every day. Adding in 80 million over the space of a week or two, and some number less than that returning to election centers, will barely be felt. And Dave says, this isn't Christmas week. It's just another slightly busy week in the life of the Postal Service. So basically, the point of this column, which I commend to you, of course, is that this is about the voter suppression. It's not about finances, because assuming each state adds 35 cents to 80 million ballots, that does nothing for the USPS's overall finances. It's just a small drop in an ocean. It's also not about safeguarding voter fraud. Even a Trump-appointed judge has given the Trump campaign one day to find evidence of mail-in voter fraud or admit that it doesn't exist. Day says it's just about voter suppression. As former number 2 at the Postal Service, Ronald Stroman, indicated this week. And then Dave goes on with this and talks about the importance of the post office, okay, for everyday life. And he says, if you do get a ballot by mail, use a drop box or turn it in at the election office or local polling site. So there it is. I thought that one was worthwhile for you to look at. I'll stop sharing that now and get to my main topic for tonight, which is Social Security. I really want to clear this up once and for all, if I have not already in other live streams, and even if I have, I want to clear it up once and for all. Have I shared this yet? Did I actually share the screen? No. So let me share the screen of this. Okay, this is an article from Common Dreams. The article shows what is right and what is wrong with what people have been saying about the Trump threat to destroy Social Security. It was written by Jake Johnson. It was published on August 14, 2020. Despite, quote, frantic, unquote, walk-back efforts, this is by Trump, group says Trump threat to destroy Social Security must be believed and defeated. And the article says, as the White House scrambles to contain the political backlash sparked by President Donald Trump's latest threat to defund Social Security if he's reelected in November, one progressive advocacy group said Thursday that Trump's long history of attacking the New Deal program means he should be taken at his word and diligently opposed when he openly states his intention to terminate the system's revenue stream. Now, that is an inaccuracy. The system's revenue stream does not come from the payroll taxes. This is about his threat to get rid of payroll taxes. The revenue stream for Social Security does not come from those payroll taxes. The revenue stream from Social Security comes directly from the Treasury spending account. And the revenue stream that goes into the Treasury spending account does not come from taxes, and it does not come from bond sales. I'll get into this as we go forward. So he cannot terminate the system's revenue stream by terminating the payroll taxes. He can't do that for Medicare either. Going on, quote, the White House is telling us not to believe our own eyes and ears, Social Security Works President Nancy Altman said in response to attempts this week by Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and one anonymous administration official to walk back Trump's overt threat last weekend to unilaterally and permanently end the payroll tax which funds Social Security and Medicare. During the press briefing, Trump repeated his threat without equivocating. On the assumption I win, the president said, we're going to be terminating the payroll tax after the end of the year. He can't be terminating the payroll tax after the beginning of the new year, unquote. He can't be terminating it even if he wins, because it would be necessary for him to also have the Republicans take over both houses of Congress. Now, even if he should squeak through again, and he's not going to win by an awful lot if he does win, and of course his chances currently are being assessed by 538 as something like 71 to 29 or 72 to 28 against him. But even if he were to squeak through again, it's very unlikely that he would have both the Senate and the House on his side. And it's very unlikely that they would vote with him to eliminate the payroll tax anyway. He got almost no support from the Republicans this time when it came to his eliminating the payroll tax. So he can postpone the payroll tax for a time using his authority, as the president, but the payroll tax is due at the end of the year. So he can't be holding off on the payroll tax any more than that. It would be a year-by-year thing without Congress cooperating with him. And he won't have control of both houses, of Congress. So they won't be terminating the payroll tax after the beginning of the new year, in any case. But of course, it's also true, as I just said, that the payroll tax doesn't fund Social Security anyway. Going forward, by attempting to massage and downplay Trump's comments, Altman said, White House officials, quote, insist that Trump did not mean what he said, and, quote, has no plans to defund Social Security, so let's review the evidence, says Nancy Altman, whom I happen to know slightly. Altman went on to offer several examples of Trump's hostility to Social Security from both before he took office and his 2000 book, quote, The America We Deserve, unquote. Trump called for the privatization of Social Security, and during his presidency, despite his 2016 campaign vows to protect the popular safety net program from cuts. So, that certainly is one example. Nancy Altman is quite right. Trump called for that. I'll quote again, once in office, Trump's proposed budgets included cuts to Social Security. Again, that's true, unquote. In other words, she wrote that as well, and that is, again, true. And quote again, earlier this year, Trump told a room filled with Davos elites that he would look into cutting entitlements, code for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, if he is reelected. And that's true, too. He did that. Last week, Trump showed us how he would defund Social Security when he unilaterally ordered the IRS to stop collecting Social Security contributions, but temporarily. Okay, legally, that order is only good until the end of the year. At that time, those Social Security payroll taxes would be due from everybody. Now, I've already gone over in some short takes, I've gone over specifically why I think that his suspension of withholding is not going to work, because employers are going to go right on withholding. Why are they going to go right on withholding? Because they know that their Social Security contributions and the employee contributions are going to be due at the end of the year, and that Trump cannot postpone it any longer than that. He can start postponing it again in the new term. He can do it again when he gets back into office, but he cannot postpone the taxes that are due at the beginning of the year any longer than that. They will fall due, and they will have to be paid. The employers know that. They're going to have the money because they will have withheld it, and they're going to be paid. He can't stop that. Year by year, they will be paid, even if he prevents the withholding for the whole year. He can't go beyond 1 year. It's going to be paid. Altman said that whether one believes the president's own words or his advisor's attempted walkbacks, quote, the only prudent course for people who care about their own Social Security is to defeat Trump this November, unquote. Now, I entirely agree. That the only prudent course for people who care about their earned Social Security is to defeat Trump. That is the only prudent course. Because Trump is going to try to create all kinds of chaos with Social Security, and undoubtedly he'll hurt the program, hurt also faith in the program, and maybe work to stop the real source of funding for Social Security, or reduce the real source of funding, which is congressional appropriations, not payroll tax contributions. Right now, Social Security has, not in the bank account, but in the accounts that are kept by the Treasury Department and by the Social Security Administration, but jointly, in the bonds that Social Security holds, that it earns, I think it's 2.85% of interest on, at this point. There's a credit there in that account of $2.9 trillion, right now. If Trump doesn't collect Social Security taxes, okay, for a few months, and Social Security payments still continue to get paid out, as they will be, that's going to reduce the credit by at most a couple of $100 million, and that's about it. That's what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. Maybe $300 billion. That's all. Hardly make a dent in that account in terms of marketing down what is in that account. Okay. Then at the beginning of next year, certainly in the first quarter, those taxes, okay, are going to be paid, and the account, okay, is going to be up again. If Trump withholds it for a whole year, then the account would be down by, let's say, $1 trillion or something like that. But at the beginning of the next year, it would be back up again. Bam. So Trump can't stop this process by withholding payroll taxes. So Social Security works as. So do you believe Trump, or do you believe the frantic walkbacks of his advisors who have realized defunding Social Security is political arsenic? And they say the only prudent course for people who care about their earned Social Security is to defeat Trump this November. So the answer to the question is, I believe Trump in what he says, that he wants to find ways to defund it. I don't believe that a way to defund it is to withhold Social Security taxes for a few months. I don't think that's going to work. It's one of Trump's schemes that's going to go right down the drain again. Here they point out, last Saturday, as Common Dreams reported, Trump signed an executive order instructing the Treasury Department to defer collection of the employee side payroll tax from September 1st through the end of the year. Oh, by the way, there's no deferring. He didn't do anything to defer the employer side of the payroll tax. So the employers are going to be paying that all along. So do you think in that situation the employers are going to allow the employees to postpone their own payroll tax contributions? I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is that the employers are going to send a single check to the Treasury Department. And that check is going to include the employer side payroll tax and the employee side payroll tax. And it's going to be in the form of a wire, or it's going to be in the form of a check. How is Treasury Department going to defer collection? That's not going to be possible. I mean, what is it going to do? Is it not going to cash the check? I mean, the check is not even going to say, this is the employee's contribution and this is our contribution. It's just going to send in a check to the Treasury. It says in the article, the order has been met with widespread confusion as well as condemnation from experts and progressive observers who say the deferral is an unconstitutional assault on Social Security, and Medicare. I don't know if the deferral is unconstitutional. It's just stupid. It just won't work. Quote, employers don't know whether the order is mandatory, what the process will be for eventually paying back the deferred taxes, or even which employees are actually eligible, unquote. Bloomberg Law reported this week. Quote, those questions make it extremely difficult for employers to carry out the changes and adjust their payroll systems, unquote. Now, I've given you a little flavor of some of the difficulties involved in this. In an op-ed for Common Dreams, Max Rickman, president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security, and Medicare, the NCP-SSM, marked the 85th anniversary of the enactment of the Social Security Act of 1935 by warning that Trump, quote, has been enlisted in the effort to dismantle, unquote, the program. And Rickman said, Quote, the most glaring example is the president's unilaterally and possibly unconstitutional action to defer the payroll taxes that fund Social Security through the end of the year, unquote. Quote again, upon announcing this executive officer, the president promised to terminate payroll taxes if he was reelected. That would either bankrupt Social Security or force, and here's the secret, it says, or force depend, I think the word it should be there, or force it, the words it and to, or force it to depend on general revenue, which would destroy the program's worker-funded nature and open it up to benefit cuts in the name of deficit reduction. So this is what they're really afraid of. It's not that ending the payroll tax would immediately defund Social Security, because they know, like I know, that Social Security is really funded by congressional appropriations. What they're saying is that it would either bankrupt Social Security or, well, I don't think it's going to bankrupt Social Security. They know it's not going to bankrupt Social Security because Congress could still appropriate Social Security payments in full, and then general revenue would pay for Social Security. But then they say, which would destroy the program's worker-funded nature. Why? In other words, are workers not going to be paying any more taxes? But even if they weren't, is the spending in the program actually funded in any way by workers' taxes? The answer to that question is no. It is funded by congressional appropriations, and the Treasury spending account is topped up by the Federal Reserve when the Federal Reserve gets certain triggers. It is true that one of these triggers, is the depositing of tax revenue in the Treasury spending account, but in the process of settlement, the tax payments are destroyed, and the Federal Reserve creates completely new money for the Treasury spending account. The same is true with revenue from bonds, and the same process. The bond sale transactions are settled. The bond sale revenue is destroyed. New money is created in the Treasury spending account by the Federal Reserve at that point. Taxes and borrowing, however, are not the only two triggers that can be used by the Fed to top up the Treasury spending account. A third trigger is the Treasury Department could mint platinum coins. The mint could do the minting, could deposit $1 trillion platinum coins, or a single $100 trillion platinum coin, a 1-ounce platinum coin, in the public enterprise fund account of the mint. Then the Treasury can sweep the mint's account for the seigniorage, which is the profit, the difference between the cost of producing the coin and bringing it up to the Federal Reserve, roughly $3,500 to $4,000, and the remainder of the $1 trillion or the $2 trillion or the $5 trillion or the $100 trillion is then the seigniorage. So the Treasury Department can sweep a $100 trillion coin for the seigniorage and get into the Treasury spending account roughly $100 trillion, and it can use a part of that to spend the appropriations that Congress used to fund Social Security benefits. So, there's that trigger, and then a final trigger, which I've mentioned also in the progressive short takes and in a variety of writings, of mine. The final trigger is overt congressional financing itself. In other words, when Congress passes an appropriations bill for Social Security, it can simply order the Fed to place the necessary reserves in the Treasury spending account to cover Social Security benefits. That, by the way, is a one-sentence job. Doing that for Social Security is a one-sentence job. If the Congress also wants to give the Treasury Department the capability to repay all Treasury debt that falls due during the period of the appropriation, that would involve adding another sentence. The two sentences I have called in other places overt congressional financing. So the point here being, if you're looking for triggers besides taxing and issuing debt instruments, there's platinum coin seigniorage and overt congressional financing. Those are two other triggers, but it's always the case that it's the Fed that adds the new money to the Treasury spending account, or the new reserves in the Treasury spending account, which the Treasury then spends into the economy. That's the stream. That's the revenue stream for Social Security. In many instances nowadays, it doesn't flow through sending a check to people. It flows through sending an electronic wire to people. The revenue stream flows by marking up the checking accounts in people's banks. That's the way it works, in actuality. So, what's going on here is there's a political game. What Trump is doing is he's going to want to terminate the payroll tax, if he's reelected. And then he's going to want to say, see, Social Security has no more funding. So let's cut it, or privatize it. And then what's going to happen with Democrats and Republicans who are afraid for their seats? What they're going to do is say, look, the predicted tax collections for Social Security is going to cover 79%, of benefits anyway. We're just going to appropriate the other 20%, as well. And we'll cover it, so we don't have to issue debt in order to cover it. We'll cover it with overt congressional financing, or we'll cover it with platinum coins. It's only going to be something like $250 billion a year anyway that we have to cover that way. So what's the big deal? They might even say, we'll just sell bonds to fund it. That's not a big deal. It's only $250 billion. Given the scale of deficits right now, it's just not that much more to add. Why would it open it up to benefit cuts in the name of reducing the deficits? Stephanie Kelton's book is out now. The principles of MMT are getting more and more widely spread, throughout our population. People know now, they know now that the federal government, since it's monetarily sovereign in its own currency, can pay for any need of the population. It does not need those payroll taxes to pay for Social Security. All it has to do is make sure the general revenue is raised by enough so that not too much of a deficit has to be run. Like I just said, 250 billion or something like that. Well, it doesn't have to be 250 billion. I mean, it could run a deficit of all Social Security payments. I'm not quite sure what they are right now. They must be like 650 billion to 750 billion per year, something like that in Social Security payments. So we're running huge deficits this year. There's still no inflation. That could be funded with debt, okay, as well. I'm not saying it should be. I'd prefer it were funded with platinum coins or through overt congressional financing. That's the direct way to fund it. And it makes clear that our Constitution still operates in the way it was supposed to, specifically that Congress is the source of funding for federal programs. That's what constitutionally is the case. That's what in reality is the case. But the reality is hidden by the complexities of Federal Reserve additions to federal spending account, to the federal spending account. Okay, quote again. On this anniversary, we must renew our commitment to preserving and expanding Social Security in the face of these relentless efforts to undermine it. Fortunately, the broader public, those who paid for, depend on, and cherish their earned benefits, have an opportunity to elect new leaders who will protect seniors, the disabled, and their loved ones against the hazards and vicissitudes of life that President Roosevelt understood so well, unquote. Another nod or wave or bow to President Roosevelt, who is still a leading light for many people who think that the Democratic Party still may have something to offer. And for progressives who don't think the Democrats but still have anything to offer, they don't think so because they think that the tradition of the New Deal has been abandoned by the Democratic Party. Okay, let me make a summary statement now and clarify all this. So Nancy Altman, Social Security Works, and NPCSSM, whatever the acronym is, and other defenders of Social Security play into this myth that Social Security taxes pay for Social Security benefits. They do not. Congressional appropriations pay for Social Security benefits. If you want to guarantee Social Security benefits in perpetuity, just make sure that the congressional appropriations are approved the year before they have to be spent. Because if they're approved the year before the benefit spending has to take place, then the federal government will always be mandated to find the money in some way. If it can't find the money through taxes, if it cannot find the money through bond sales, if it cannot find it through either of these two triggers, it will just have to use platinum coin seniorage. Or if Congress doesn't want to use heavier taxes, or if Congress doesn't want to have the Treasury issue further debt, then the Congress can use overt congressional financing to fund it. All it has to do is in the appropriation bill, it passes the year before the appropriations have been specified for. It can just add the two brief sentences for overt congressional financing to that appropriations bill. And the Federal Reserve will, when that bill is passed, add the necessary reserves to the Treasury spending account. That is all that has to be done. There is no need for any trust fund. If you want to tax people for it, you can tax it as part of the income tax. Just don't tax too much to create a depression. Don't tax too little so as to create inflation. Calibrate taxes so they're not too much and they're not too little. There's no need for a trust fund. That was a fiction used by FDR as a political trick. And later on, he justified Social Security by saying it was a fundamental economic right, part of the Economic Bill of Rights. I think today we need to use that justification for Social Security. We need to say Social Security is the human right of every American. It's a human right. It's a right to dignity in retirement and the money necessary to create a retirement which is dignified. That's what it's about. We must insist on that right. We must claim that right. We must fight for that right. And we must implement that right. And I would recommend that we implemented it with a Social Security program that is protected as we go forward through overt congressional financing. That is the best way to do it. It's not through having a separate and dedicated payroll tax, which in fact is not really dedicated to it because it never gets into a spending account that actually belongs to the Social Security program. That never happens. That's not how it works. That's what we have to understand so well. We have to face our fictions, and we have to get rid of our fictions. We have to get rid of our myths and justify Social Security in the way it should be justified, as a right of all Americans to grow old in dignity, and as a right that can always be funded by the sovereign monetary power of the United States government, as long as that government continues to retain its monetary sovereignty as provided in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. So that's the truth of it, folks. And that's what I wanted to say about Trump's effort to destroy Social Security. Yeah, he's going to try to defeat it. He's going to try to destroy it. But the only way he can ultimately destroy it is by stopping the appropriations. And if he's defeated this time, we can stop that effort. We can cut it short. It won't happen. Okay? So I will now turn to your comments. I will stop sharing this article. And I will return to your comments. And we'll go through them. Whoa. Still 20 people here. Very, very good. Let me remind you before I start working on your comments. Let me remind you of the Patreon account again. I'm at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Okay, if you like my work, then please make a contribution. Now I'll get right to your comments. Steve Wolfbrand said, "Poor kids, they must be very confused." Yeah, they must be very confused. Susan says, "Phone banged for Ed Markey last night and canvassed for AnnaCallahan.com today." What race is Anna Callahan but running in, Susan? Steve Wolfbrand said, "I don't know them." Is she running for Joe Kennedy's seat by any chance? Steve Wolfbrand said, "I don't know them, but thanks for fighting." Carmen says, "Baked apples, they're safe. It's just my immune system deciding to be an ass tonight. It's hanging out with Herr Fuhrer." Deborah says, "I forgot the time here in Carmen. Most store-bought apples are GMO'd now," says Kay. And Carmen says, "That 5 jam from the farmer's market, I figured if I bake them, they'll be easier on my digestive system, but no, not tonight." Kathy Langtot said, "This was a great article." Yeah, the Truth Out article. Wasn't it great? Lana says, "I only buy organic apples." We buy organic apples too. And Susan says, "Send a donation to Alex Morse if you can. What they did to Morse was horrible." Yeah, we sent a donation to him. We will send another donation to him too. Susan says, "Richie Neal is the worst." Yeah, he is the worst. He's in league with the power companies too. Not just the pharmaceuticals and the healthcare people, but the powers. I mean, he's everyone's bitch. He really is. Steve Wolfbrand says, yes. Kay says, "Food poisons us, so the sick care can make yet more money from us." Shake my head. Kathy Langtot says, "I saw Mars on the Useful Idiots podcast. He's an impressive young man. Super thoughtful, intelligent, passionate, energetic, and innovative. Has a very bright future." Yeah, I think so too. Carmen says, "Got them. Correction, having technical trouble too." Lana says, "A rogue Roosevelt." I think the Roosevelts and the Kennedys of today are not real Roosevelts, okay, and Kennedys. I think over the years they've become synthetic Roosevelts, okay, and Kennedys. The real heirs are people like Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey and the squad. Steve says, Alex Morris is being set up for simply having a personal life. Seems to be backfiring. Send a few bucks to help him. Steve says, saw that. Sandy says, hello. Kay says, hey, Sandy. Kathy says, I have a huge journalism crush on Matt Taibbi. Laugh out loud. Yeah, he's a hell of a journalist. He is. He's one of the best around today. Sandy Digg says, hi, Kay. Barbara says, a total smear campaign. Ryan Grimm debunked the story. Neil should fall. Neil should fall. Let's help Neil to fall. Steve Wolfburn said, I'm going to send a few butts to the Morse campaign just because I don't like the smear campaign. Carmen says, in other words, he's a valuable ally. You bet. Steve says, but Katie is pretty cute as well. And she has a really terrific sense of humor, too, doesn't she? She's really funny. Barbara says, yes, it would. Neil is powerful and must go. Susan says, phone bank for Morse. Kay says, Ro said he voted against the party platform because it did not include Medicare for all. Good for him. Yes, I know. Steve says, so glad you are addressing this, Doc. And Nikki King said, I really like Morse. I also really hate the left becoming the sexual morality police on consenting adults. How many times have we railed against Republicans for wanting to make laws about what kind of sex was okay? I don't know how many times, but I'll tell you, when they ran Al Franken out of the Senate on a rail, I thought it was going too far. I mean, I thought he should have stayed in. I mean, yes, what he did was completely improper. He apologized for it. I don't think it was necessary for him to resign. We needed him in the Senate. We have lost something by having Tina Smith instead. And we've lost something for women, too. Everything is not always symbolic. If you're talking about someone who would have made things better for women and strengthened the rights of women, then Al Franken was the much better of the two. Barbara says, thank you for addressing Morse. He deserves our support. Susan says, in Massachusetts, we need to get rid of Stephen Lynch, Bill Keating, Richie Neal, and Seth Moulton. Yes, yes, absolutely. Steve DeVore says, hi, everyone. Hi, Steve. And Lana says, the Postmaster General apparently is a 1%er and owns much stock in FedEx or similar business. Yes, he has a conflict of interest. He doesn't have the appearance of a conflict of interest. He has a conflict of interest. Now, Trump has gotten away with his conflicts of interest because Pelosi won't impeach him for that. But the Postmaster General, he is trying to profit from his stock in companies that compete with the post office. Sandy Digg says, hi, Stephen. Carmen says, oh, wow. Every time my hand gets near this device, it sends emojis without me touching it. Sandy says, magic. Steve Wolf bet. Lana, but magic powers, Carmen or Abdul? Kathy Langtott says, he's been the most consistent in standing up to party leaders. Steve says, could be the alter ego Abdul. And Steve says, boxes removed, trucks towed somewhere, and millions worth of mail sorters trashed. Kay says, yes, he has. Lana says, exactly, Steve. She's morphing before our eyes. Steve says, that looks like my picture sending likes and loves. I haven't sent anything. Lana Dell, I have a high electromagnetic field. Street lights go off when I walk by. No lie, I don't know. Maybe they have sensors in them. Gee, what was that movie called about the witches and Pie Wackett and Kim Novak and Jack Lemmon? Jack Lemmon was in that movie, right? Wasn't he? Yeah. Who was playing the? Oh, it was Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. I think that's what it was. And what was that movie called? Had some witchy title, I forget. Anyway, we should all request a mail-in ballot and drop it off 2 weeks ahead at the place your town specifies. That's right. Stephen Wolfbrand, oh my God, hadn't seen your alter ego comment until after I wrote mine. No lie. Barbara says, payroll taxes were never needed. No, they were never needed. Absolutely. And we gotta stop Social Security Works and NPCSSM from playing into the myth every time someone calls for a payroll tax cut. Because right now, a payroll tax cut might not be a particularly good thing to have, because people need money directly in their bank accounts now. It's time for a basic income for people now, at least but temporarily, as long as the coronavirus, as long as we have the crisis of COVID, and perhaps for a year after that, we may, at least for that period of time, actually need a basic income. So let's have one at this point. Payroll tax cut is not needed right now. But in some future recession, a payroll tax cut could be very useful. Could be very useful. But just because we have payroll taxes does not mean we have to have a trust fund into which the taxes supposedly go. We should be upfront that the trust fund is a record of the contributions that have been made to Social Security by the public. That's it. There should be no claims and no implications and no lines in laws that say if the trust fund falls to zero, there can't be payments, because we know that's not true. We know the trust fund can fall to zero and Congress can appropriate full benefits. It's always and everywhere up to Congress. If Congress doesn't appropriate Social Security benefits, then it doesn't matter what the trust fund said. Those benefits won't be paid. C says, Abdul is a terrorist in an alternate universe. Be careful. And Sandy says, someone posted this on FB. Here's how to make sure 100% that your mail-in ballot will be counted without relying on or overwhelming the USPS. Request a mail-in ballot. Do not mail it. Google your supervisor of elections to see where you can drop off your mail-in ballot. It's usually not the polling place. All states allow this. Here's what you're accomplishing by doing this. One, you're not relying on the USPS to get your ballot in on time. So no matter what Trump does, your ballot gets, I think it gets in on time. I don't know if that guarantees your ballot's going to be counted. I think there can be shenanigans afterwards, but apparently mail-in voting to date seems to be very reliable. It doesn't seem to be a problem. What we ought to make sure is that it's a paper ballot, and make sure those paper ballots are counted in public, including the mail-in ballots. That's what we need. Steve Wolbrand, terrible association. Stephen DeVore. Someone has copied our profile pics. I wonder who. I don't think it's cool at all. Stephen DeVore, what for? As a matter of fact, I think it's a bit immature. Carmen Muniz says, buzz in online news that DT is considering pardoning Snowden. Yeah, I saw that. I don't know if he's going to pardon Snowden. I hope he does. It will be a good thing he does, okay, if he does that. But I don't know if he's going to pardon Snowden. He's been hostile to Snowden of late. I don't know why. Okay, he would pardon him now, but I hope he does. And Assange too. Assange too. Except I think with Assange, no pardon is required for Assange because Assange has done nothing wrong. I think what Trump has to do is get the federal government to drop the charges. That's what I think has to be done. And to allow Assange to get out of jail and go home. Steve says, I think this election will be basically a coup d'etat. The waters will be so muddy, no one will know what's happening. Kay says, don't believe that. Steve says, I only had one watch that didn't die within days. Oh, it was a pulsar that took my pulse from X back in tennis days when I could slow my HR to 30 BPMs. Whoa. You must have been in great shape, Steve. Sandy Degg says, that's fine with MR. My profile pic is my dog. Kay says, I think so too, Steve. It's a damn mess. Sandy says, MR equals me. Oh, okay. Stephen DeVore says, I think Trump and his people have started a misinformation campaign, confusing the election results for everyone. Steve says, like Hemingway said, the bill always comes. Kay says, mine is too, Sandy, laugh out loud. And Steve says, our payroll taxes don't pay for anything. And Dolores says, when I vote by mail, I bring it to the drop-off box at the supervisor of elections office. Staff verify your signature at the time, so if there is a problem, you can straighten it out. If I'm out of town and have to mail it in, I call to verify they receive my ballot. Some locations you can verify online. Barbara Wernick says, he will be obscene, but Dems will not be better. Sandy says, hi, Margot. Steve says, Stephen Wolfbrand says, we all going to pay sooner or later. Margot Shepard says, hi. Sandy Evelina says, they'll play as dirty as the Repubs have already started, it seems. Carmen says, but found out hand sanitizer removes permanent marker in a jiffy. Good. Evelina says, were you making signs? Stephen DeVore says, I voted at the library 2 blocks from my house. No need for the PO at all. Last year I had the state send me a ballot, and I dropped it off there. It was so easy. Barbara says, laugh out loud. Employers will stop the payment. And Steve Wolfbrand says, the check is in the mail. Evelina says, great. Sandy says, no line, no waiting. Steve says, take comfort in that chaos became the plan once we stopped here to pit organized crime, to pit 2 organized crime syndicates against each other. Evelina says, so Congress is going along with Trump when he says he's going to defund SS? No, they're not going along with him. No, the Democrats aren't going to go along with him. The House is not going to go along with him. No, what he's doing is he's using the authority of the executive to order the Treasury not to collect the payroll taxes. But that's only good till the end of the year. Only good till the end of the year. After the end of the year, the payroll taxes are due. They are due. The employers have to send them in. He cannot forgive beyond that. Steve says, support Paula Jean Swearingen, Angelica Duenas, the new squad, Alex Morse. Yes. By the way, Paula Jean was on tonight with Bernie Sanders. They had a town hall in West Virginia. Bernie also had a town hall in Kentucky where he was on with Charlie Booker and a few other good folks down there in Kentucky. And Bernie was on with Paula Jean and some other good folks from West Virginia. And that town hall, I thought was very good. I thought, okay, it rocked. I thought the Kentucky one rocked also. I just didn't know where Amy McGrath was. Where is Amy McGrath? Why isn't she talking about what people need in her state? Why isn't she running on the Green New Deal? Why isn't she running on a basic income for people? Why isn't she running on Medicare for all? Because she wants to lose. She wants to lose to Mitch. Kathy Langdock says, no matter who's declared the winner, half the country will not believe it. I don't know. Might not be half the country. Might only be a third of the country will not believe it. If the campaign goes well, there'll only be a third of the country who are going to be diehard Trumpists. Maybe even less than that. Evelina says, I keep associating him with the Morse code. Okay, I've known a lot of Morses in my life. It's quite a common name. Steve Wolfbrand says, exactly. Carmen says, wow, my emojis are going haywire. I swear I'm not doing that. And Kay says, John Larson was on the 0 Hour. John Larson or Alex Lawson? With R.J. Eskow today talking about SS expansion. Seriously, was it John Larson or Alex Lawson? Evelina says SOS. Steve says SOS. Steve Wolfbrand says Jinx. Lana says Brillo. Brillo. Steve Wolfbrand says Iceberg Dad. Kay says they want to kill off all of us seniors and poor. Susan Aubrey Wild says, I feel a genocide coming on. Could is one thing. Wanting to is another. And Steve Wolfbrand says, I think a wooden nickel would be better than the platinum coin. I don't know. I think the platinum coin is better. I like the symbolism of a 1 ounce platinum coin being worth $100 trillion. That's cool. Carmen Muniz says, the genocide started when DT called COVID a hoax and refused to help states with necessary aid like PPEs. Yep. It's a genocide against us. Stephen DeVore says, Steve Wolfbrand, and we're heading towards it at full speed. Yes, we are we're heading towards a coup attempt, and we better be there and forced to stop it. Evelina says, I was thinking that Congress won't appropriate the rest of SS either. I don't know, okay, if you were referring to that. Congress, if it's a Democratic Congress, they're going to appropriate the rest of Social Security. They wouldn't dare not to. As soon as people know that it's really all about appropriations and it doesn't matter what's in the frickin' trust fund, and they're going to find out over the next few years. It's going to be plain to everybody over the next few years that the trust fund is an empty fiction, just paper. I mean, it's not even paper. It's just electronic accounting. Lana says, yes, they do keep the myth going. Steve says, damn the torpedoes. Susan Aubrey Wild says, that plus COVID plus homelessness and more, I'm sure. Stephen DeVore says, I want off the ship. I wonder, does anybody have any relatives in Canada that's in need of a houseboy? I've wondered that myself, Steve. Kay says, nobody wants to believe MMT. Shake my head. Brainwashed Dems. Barbara Warnick says, no, there are a lot more people who believe in MMT than used to. Don't worry about that. Barbara says, Congress is in charge of the public purse. SS taxes do not fund the payments. Congress does. It's all political. No trust fund exists. No trust fund with any money in it exists. That's for sure. Steve Wolfbrand says lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. And Lana says both sides use the Fed debt and deficit as political. I keep trying to educate people how this ends up hurting us. Well, you see how it ends up hurting us. Uh, they're making the wrong argument about Trump's payroll tax cuts. The right argument is they're silly, they're not going to do any good, and the way he's implementing them won't work. Those are the arguments we need. It's not that it's going to defund Social Security. It's not going to defund Social Security. Kay says it is a human right. Barbara Wernick says, woo-ah. Carmen Muniz says, I'd love to see Dr. Joe on that crystal ball show explaining this. Sandy Degg said, we can't leave the country. Didn't Stephanie explain it on Crystal Ball show? I don't know if Crystal and Sagar would give me enough time to explain it. I don't do well explaining things in 100 words or less. I mean, Steph's a specialist at that. I usually require a few thousand words to explain things with a lot of ranting in between. Jenny says we can't leave the country. A majority of countries will not accept us because of Trump's handling of COVID. We are lepers. We are. And Steve says you must fight for your right to party. Lana says, or get your SS, as it were. It's deep psyops propaganda groomed throughout the decades to trick people into accepting artificial scarcity and needless austerity unquestionably. Well formulated, Carmen. That was well done. We should add the right to party favor. Gee. Bell, Book, and Candle, that's right. Bell, Book, and Candle. Bell, Book, and Candle, yes. Absolutely right. I'm sorry, I scrolled down too fast. I got to get back to where I was. Okay, Nikki says we should add the right to party favor of choice in retirement too. Alana says Carmen Mina is exactly right, and I get very frustrated with people who refuse to learn. Patience, Alana, patience. Stephen DeWar says fools still locked into neoliberal thinking. Carmen says, Alana Dow, it's so draining to the point of depression. Sometimes it is, yeah, it's true. Kay says, I've been in depression for years now. It keeps getting worse. Steve Wolfbrand says, me too. Susan Eldridge says, Anna Callahan is running for Massachusetts State Rep for the 34th Middlesex District. She is fighting for transparency in our state house. Who's running for Joe Kennedy's seat? And the reason why I asked that is I think he had to give it up to run for the Senate, didn't he? Barbara Wernick says, Neil, largest corporate donors of all. He does. We got to beat him. Evelina says, I was warned. Biden people are posing as burners and Bernie groups telling people in a very pushy way to vote for Biden, vote shaming. Well, bring him on. Yeah, bring him on. We'll handle him here. He can come in. They can come into our group anytime. And we'll handle him. We will handle him. We will wipe the floor with him. Carmen asks, what is Bonnie doing? Bonnie is in the next room sitting on the couch watching me on Facebook, undoubtedly. She's probably about to come in here. Nikki King says, yes, I agree about Franken. He should run again. And I don't think he'll beat Tina Smith now because it'll probably seem to people, okay, in Minnesota that Tina Smith is, doing a pretty good job. She's an establishment den. She's, moving through the ranks. She's not doing anything horrible. So, or that they perceive as horrible. They don't understand. She is not as offensive an austerity monger as Klobuchar is. So she's probably okay with them. Maybe Franken should run against Amy. That would be a good idea. Kay says Bernie had virtual town halls with progressives in Kentucky and West Virginia today. Correct. Nikki says, I got a kick out of messing with them. Lana says, Franken was my senator, and the way the women of the Democratic acted with him was outrageous. He called for an investigation, and they wouldn't even do that. It was outrageous. It was outrageous. It really was. Carmen says, I don't follow him anymore. He just pisses me off these days. Oh, you mean Al Franken? Steve says, Al Franken was a dick, though. Hillary guy. Quote, you're being ridiculous, unquote. F him. He was. He was a Hillary supporter. He wasn't as lefty as we wanted, but he was more lefty than Tina Smith. Kay says, status quo is on the way to the DNC convention for live coverage of the protests there. I know. I've been seeing Jordan and Jen talk about that. Evelyn says, you can usually tell who they are right away when discussion devolves to name calling. I like bantering back and forth with them, too. Evelina says, fourth. Steve says, bell, book, and candle. Carmen says, why can't people figure out that SS benefits isn't something accumulated from working when little kids get it for autism and such? That's true. Okay. Nikki says, and then there are survivor benefits, too. You don't get the survivor benefits, okay, from working either. But Paul Ryan survived on survivor benefits. That's where he got into a position that was powerful enough to hurt us. Okay, and Nikki King says, I hope he does. What an ungrateful whelp that Paul Ryan was. And so Nikki King says, and Chelsea Manning should be left alone. Yes, absolutely. And Carmen says, pardoning Snowden would deflect the fascism scope off him. Probably. Sandy Degg says, yeah, Bell, Book, and Candle was the movie. Candle. Steve says, a fun movie. I just saw a partial notification. I think Robert Trump just died. And Lana says, oh, well, Trump's brother. And Carmen said, yes. And Lana said, rest in peace. Okay, and Nikki said, Amy's a Trump Democrat, or so she said, yeah. Well, first she said she was a progressive. Then she said she was a Trump Democrat. Actually, I suspect she's neither. She's just a lady without any principles who wanted to become a senator. Shannon Dick said, I love that movie. I love Jimmy Stewart. Well, I used to like him too till I found out he was a Goldwaterite and a right winger. Okay, and a winger. He was an offensive winger. And Amy, Carmen says, Amy McGrath is in Sturgis on her motorcycle. You're kidding, Carmen. Steve says, fuck Amy McGrath. I'm not going to reply to that. And Kay says, Rump's brother is dead. And Nikki asks if that Kay is Mary's dad. I don't know if that Kay is Mary's dad. I don't really keep track of the family. Carmen says, but Bonnie, are you eating some ice cream? Hey, Bonnie. And Steve says, no. And Barbara says, no, he's been dead. Sandy says that her dad was the oldest brother. Sandy said he died in his 40s, I think. Carmen says, I hope the platinum coin has Dr. Joe's pick on one side and the CRFC on the other. And Nikki King says, oh, okay, I wonder if he had COVID. And Nikki King said, that would be ironic. One of his uncles died in the 1980 pandemic. He probably wouldn't care, Trump. Probably wouldn't care. Carmen says, if so, then COVID missed again. And Nikki says, okay, or was it one of the brothers? I forget. Honey, the body's not hearing me. Or was it one of the brothers? And COVID missed again. Hey, Bonnie, you coming in here? Not yet. No, she says not yet. Okay. So Nikki says, okay, or was it one of the brothers? I forget. And Kay says, yes, Kelton was on Rising. And Nikki says, there are too many Freds in that family, laugh out loud. And Susan Eldridge says, Issane Lecky and Jesse Mermel are running for Jay Kill's seat in the Massachusetts CD4. Yeah, right. I noticed that the other day, and I forget, okay, that it was Issane Lecky. She's pretty impressive, isn't she? She'll probably make a good congressman. In fact, I think she might even be an addition to the squad, right? Wouldn't that be ironic? Okay, if Joe Kennedy lost, okay, and in addition to the squad won that seat, wouldn't that be fantastic? Okay, Nikki said Franken could run for state office, like for governor, you mean? Nikki King said, that would be great. Amy Klobuchar needs to go. Carmen says, like in The Handmaid's Tale. Lana says, I hope there's a progressive who primaries the Klobuchar. I would be happy with Franken. And Nikki says, exactly. Also, Dolores says, I had some mint chocolate chip ice cream made at a local farm. Delicious. We have some chocolate, coconut ice cream here that's from Trader Joe's. It's organic. We have a very small container because we're not supposed to have ice cream. Actually, this is non-dairy. This ice cream, okay, is non-dairy, so we're okay with it. And Lana says, nope, that was because before Bernie got in the race, Bill Clinton helped Franken to be reelected in 2014. Franken agreed at that time to back Hillary. I don't like it, but I understand. It's the mafia way of doing business. Well, politicians make trades. Steve Wolfbrand said Epstein didn't kill himself. Seth Rich leaked the emails to WikiLeaks. Lana says the U.S. breaks single-day COVID case. Breaking news. Ugh, that's awful. That's awful. That means there's going to be record fatalities down the line also. That's terrible. Terrible. And Steve says John Wayne was quite a racist as well. Yes, and very right-wing. Also very, he was very right-wing. And Dolores says Al Franken and others were bowing down and kissing the Clintons' rings. Yes, they were. Carmen says, yep, Avro just told me Robert Trump died. Okay, says it's very safe that all the movie stars we loved have been proven by right-wing idiots. Was Gregory Peck a right-wing idiot? And Barbara said, oh my God, yes. I think, wasn't it only Gary Cooper and Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne? Okay, and there it ended. Was Steve McQueen a right-wing idiot? Barbara Wernick says, oh my God, yes. Dolores Pierce is very sad. And Carmen Muniz says, it didn't state the reason for his death, only that he was hospitalized, okay, in New York. Okay, so Nikki says, I make my own ice cream now. Lana says, Dolores, I explained that. Carmen says, Pelosi has some ice cream called I Have No Spine. Sandy says, okay. Kay says, not sure on Peck. And Lana says, James Woods is right-wing. Yeah, I know he's right-wing. He's also reputed to have the highest IQ in Hollywood or something like that. Sandy says, okay, now I totally don't like Jimmy Stewart. He didn't play a right winger, okay, and It's a Wonderful Life, though. Right? Lana says, also, Chuck Morris and the Magnum PI actor, yeah. Yeah, it really disappointed me when I found out that he was a right winger. Okay, you think, I bet the Ben and Jerry could come up with a spineless Pelosi ice cream. Carmen says, I heard a lot of these leading men from these older movies were gay. I guess that's why they were so handsome. Well, maybe they were so handsome first, and that's why they became gay. I don't know. Steve McQueen liked his LSD. I think he was a good guy. These are very superficial things, folks. Very superficial things. It's got to be more complicated than that. Sandy says he came off so sweet in those movies. Carmen says they'd find the perfect title and it would taste like Two-Faced. Okay, folks, I've come to the end. I'm going to say goodnight for tonight. And I will see you next. I'll have a short take. I'm sure I'll have a short take out sometime on Monday. And I'll see you for another in-depth program on Tuesday. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for participating. Thank you for participating. Thank you and good night, all. Sandy says, good night, Joe, Bonnie, and everyone.